In 1942, 77 Russian soldiers were crossing this road. They knew this is their last walk. In a few minutes, they were shot by the Nazis here in Lozin, near Amersfoort. They were buried 5 kilometers from here. Later, that place became a cemetery for 800 Russian soldiers more. For next 50 years, a few people knew about that place. But nowadays, the 9th of May became the date for annual meeting of those people who know and remember the history of those soldiers. Here, at the Russian cemetery in Lozin, each minute more and more people arrive. Dutch authorities, militaries, representatives of the church and different embassies, and others, for whom it is important to commemorate these dead soldiers.
Знаешь, это не только память о всех погибших, но, скажем, если ты живешь за границей, для тебя это имеет какую-то еще большую важность.
Except for the Russians living in Holland, some families here came especially from Russia. Some of them are nervous and talk a lot. Others are standing still in silence. For them, it's not just a trip to another country. From now on, they are connected forever with this cemetery in the Netherlands, far away from their homes, because here are the graves of their fathers, Russian soldiers who were lost for their families and their country for over 60 years. Valentin Kunitsyn is one of the sons of Gavril Kunitsyn, who was buried here with the other 867 soldiers. All information he knew about his father came to his house in 1954. That year, a friend of Gavril, who was imprisoned with him in Germany, finally found the family of Kunitsyn and told them everything he knew. After harsh months in imprisonment, Gavril died of illness just 1 day before the German capitulation. Still, for Valentin, it was very important to know what happened to the father he never knew, for whom there was no grave to go to.
На протяжении многих лет ощущаешь какую-то тяжесть, какую-то неясность, да? А здесь вот такое впечатление, что какая-то картина для меня стала ясной. Ну, я как сказал, для меня это наступил момент истины по вопросу папы.
To find all information about his father's last months was impossible for Valentin until 2 months ago, when somebody called him and said the grave of his father was found. Surprisingly for Valentin, it was the Dutch journalist Remco Rieden calling. But for Remco, it wasn't his first call in this matter. He has been tracing relatives of unknown Russian soldiers for almost 15 years.
It cannot be this way. It cannot be that in my hometown 865 war victims from the Soviet Union have been buried and no one knows about it, and especially that their relatives have never been found. So I decided to try to trace them and try to inform at least one relative so that this cemetery would get a face, you know, it was unknown.
When Remco started his research, he began to explore the history of the 77 soldiers who were brought to Lozin for propaganda reasons. The German SS wanted to prove, for instance, that the Russians were not human, and they exhibited them in the midst of winter in the open air. The film they made about this experiment is lost until this day. To find relatives of those soldiers was impossible for Remco. All documents about this camp of death were burnt by the Germans. That is why he started to work with other group of soldiers, and after 2 years of hard, sometimes boring but important work with the Dutch, German and Russian archives, Remco had the first success.
Then no one ever knew whether it was possible to trace relatives, and then suddenly after 2 years of searching, I was confronted with the son of a soldier who was standing next to me and looking at me, and I had found a human being of flesh and blood with a family tragedy, with a missed father, and I could tell him where his father was buried. And when I found the first ones, I thought, well, why not 2 or 5 or 10? And I continued searching.
During the next 14 years, Rieden found over 150 families who had long ago given up the idea ever hearing about their lost relatives again. One of those is Lydia Yakovleva. Her family received a call 2 years ago.
Я по телефону вообще говорить не могла, плакала.
The story of Dmitry Kalinin, Lydia's father, is totally different from Kunitsin's. Before the Second World War, Dmitry was a veterinary. He was a beloved man in his village. When the war started, Dmitry was sent to the front to work there as a veterinary as well. He kept contacting his family during those days, sending letters. In 1944, the family of Kalinin received this one.
Our army lost a huge number of soldiers. All my friends are dead. I cannot be only a veterinary anymore. Tomorrow I'll go to battle.
On the back of the picture which was attached, he wrote,
Goodbye. Goodbye forever.
In the month after this letter was written, Dmitry's family received a document stating he was killed in the battle. Not far from his village, a memorial was built on the top of the grave which contained the Russian soldiers that were killed near that place. During the next 60 years, his wife and 2 daughters would visit this place, because the name of their father was written on the memorial with other names.
And in this case they got news that he died somewhere near Novgorod, and that he actually was buried there. His name is even on the monument, but this is a mistake. He didn't die there, he was taken prisoner there.
Знала, что тут могилка есть, но у меня чувство, я чувствую, что папы там не было. Мы ездили, но вот было такое чувство, что там его не было.
So, the information about Lydia's father was wrong. In fact, he didn't die in battle, but became a prisoner. During 1.5 years, he was suffering from disease and hunger in a German camp, and of course he couldn't have any contact with his family.
Знаете, могилка моя. Умру я на чужбине. Это в молодости играл на гармошке и пел. И на мою могилку никто не придет, только ранней весной соловей пропоет. Ну вот я говорю, ну вот папочка, мы узнали. Ты пел, что никто не узнает, где могилка моя.
Nowadays, 187 families found their fathers as well. Remco managed to find even 4 widows of the deceased. But surprisingly, for them the news about the location of their husbands is not as shocking as it is for their children.
And to be honest, the children are more impressed and more emotional than the wives, because the wives had to go on with their lives, and the children have always lived without a father, and most of them have never known him, and they've always lived with the insecurity: did he leave me? Where is he? And what's his story? And they are mostly emotional when they hear the news, and when finally they can end this period of insecurity, knowing where his grave is. I think the maximum of amount of families I can find in total is 200. Based on what I have now, I still hope to find more information, but the last ones are the most difficult ones.
They say a nation which doesn't know its past cannot have a good future. Each person has the right to know the past of his ancestors, to honor them and to connect them to the next generation. The cemetery in Amersfoort contains a small part of the Russian soldiers and citizens who were lost without any information. It is estimated that only in Europe graves like this are there in thousands. But thanks to people like Remco, who makes it his mission to bring stories from the past to life, the next generation will have chance not to repeat mistakes from the past.